Hi there. Thanks for joining CPG Bytes, a series of short video segments from Treasure Data, where we chat about the latest news and industry trends and read between the lines to provide our perspective and insights. So today, as you can see, we have a special guest in addition to David and I. I'm honored to bring in Danica Konitsky, Treasure Data's industry principal for consumer packaged goods. Previously, Danica was in the insights and analytics at both the Kraft and Conagra, and she has also been a vendor partner with consulting and sales roles at Kantar, and most recently, IBM, where she was certified as a senior consumer industry subject matter expert and worked in data and analytics services. So Danica, welcome to the CPG Bytes. And
thanks for including me finally. So happy to be with you too.
We always have a lot of fun, Danica. So in today's special CPG Bytes episode, we're going to chat through the latest trends observed in the CPG market and what are the next steps brands are taking to position themselves for the future. So David, what themes do we have today?
Well, first, I just wanted to welcome Danica, and I had the privilege and joy to work with Danica at IBM for a number of years, so it's good to be able to work with you again. So welcome to CPG Bytes. Danica, in your role as the industry principal, you have the privilege, I guess, as well, to meet with a number of different CPG leaders, big, small, around the globe. And so you get, I think, really interesting perspectives on different insights. And I think one thing that I'd like to talk to you a little bit about is, what are you seeing in the areas of personalization and some changes and evolution in that space? We like to talk about connected experiences, but what are you seeing out there in the marketplace as it relates to the evolution of personalization?
Yeah, I think it is so interesting. And I wrote something recently just based on the conversations I've been having out in the industry. And it talks about the idea that human experience, anticipation, curation, and co-creation is the new personalization. And I think of it like this: folks want to see the best of themselves reflected in how a brand communicates with them. So we are way beyond at this point. You've put my name in the email, or, custom, websites and landing pages are great. But really allowing a consumer and a shopper and a customer to interact with a brand directly and help create and curate their own experiences is really where the industry is going and what the expectations are.
Yeah, I think it's pretty interesting the way that notion of sort of co-creation. You want to feel, I can speak for myself, the brands that I'm really, really passionate about, I sort of feel like I'm part of the fabric of that brand, for lack of a better term, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that I'm helping, in some cases, you can provide comments or insights into new products, and you feel like you're not only being heard, but you're kind of part of the family almost. It's a very visceral sort of emotional connection that you can have with brands. And I know that may sound a little, soft or whatever, but I think it's really true. For those brands that you're super passionate about, there's some kind of an emotional connection that can be made. And I think companies can actually now advance that and evolve that through digital transformation, right? Which I guess gets us to the next point. It would seem like to be able to do that well requires data, and not just any old data, but that elusive first-party data. So what are you seeing out there in CPG land as it relates to whether it's new excitement or renewed energy, focus, kind of around this whole notion of first-party data? Because in many ways, it's sort of a new thing for CPG, right? Like when you and I were getting started in the industry, you were always one step removed from the end consumer. You had the dreaded retailer sitting between you and your consumer. So what are you kind of seeing out there in that first-party space?
Well, there is more energy and excitement and effort around first-party data than ever before, which I'm trying to find a way to say that in a way that really makes the point, but it's noteworthy, right? It's not just, I'm just going to talk about it because it sounds good. Folks are really putting a ton of effort behind building their own data foundation and seeing some great results. whether it is increasing just click-through rates or likelihood to purchase or decreasing cost of acquisition. And I think the folks who are doing it really, really well have a very focused plan where I'll say that about a bit differently. They have a roadmap and a vision, but they start in a very focused way, a very scoped, focused way, and really get traction early to drive value and get people in the company very excited behind the capabilities.
So it's sort of, that old adage, crawl, walk, run, right? They're actually starting small with something that adds value, and it becomes this, almost value wheel of gearbox of driving more value, and it can then grow kind of on its own versus it being kind of a cost center, I guess you could say. Which I guess if you think about, if I was running a CPG company, and I'm struggling with a lot of things, right? We have supply chain issues, we're dealing with changes in brand loyalty, we're looking at inflationary pressure, all sorts of things that I would need to focus on as a leader. What are you seeing is kind of driving and helping companies from a business case perspective? If I have X amount of money to spend on that focus, as you describe it, for first party data, what are you seeing in terms of the leaders and the people that are successful in driving that business case and that investment in managing and collecting and dealing with all this first party data?
I mean, yeah, if you can, it's so difficult to get a program like that up and running without a business case. And some people do, but a year later, folks are going to be looking at them and saying, what'd you give me for that? Right. So, the key is easy. You just tie everything back to business objectives, right? What are the business objectives, and how is first party data and a solid data foundation going to help me meet my business objectives? Because really, data is the price of admission these days. If you really want to connect and grow profitably, we just can't be too smart, right? And the demand from a business perspective is there. The impact that data can have on your business is really uncontested, but progress has been slower. I think it's starting to speed up. But the number one barrier to making progress more quickly is just organizational readiness. And I think the first thing you do to break down that barrier is tie things to business objectives. But you also can't forget about process and change management and working bottom up as well as top down within your organization.
There was something, you and I were talking the other day, and you're mentioning that one of the things that you found kind of fascinating about companies that seem to really be making a lot of progress in this space is the fact that they're very, very focused on use cases. Can you kind of talk a little bit about that in terms of, this notion of, use case driven implementations, for lack of a better term, versus kind of boil the ocean, kind of the dreaded ERP rollout kind of mentality?
Yeah, that's really the second step, right? Is once you figure out what business objectives you're going to be focused on, then what are the use cases associated with that? And that's really, to me, everything. And where you don't want to be is a year later still integrating data, right? That's where you don't want to be. And you want a really thoughtful plan going into a program like this, where you've thought about and you've dreamed big about all the possibilities, but you've laid out the most important ones, the low-hanging fruits, the one that you can have the biggest impact with the most quickly, and look at the data sources and capabilities needed to do that. And oftentimes you're going to find, look, I can integrate a few data sources and implement 10 use cases and really drive some key business objectives.
It's interesting. You and I both know Steve Horn real well, and he used to have this saying that kind of appropriate to what you just said, and that is, don't spend so much time getting the data right, spend time getting the right data. And that I think is a key element of that, is, like you said, start with the low-hanging fruit and figure out what data you need to drive that, get that right. Don't worry about, you have to have a plan, dream big, as you said, but you don't have to get all of the data correct from day one. And you don't want to be, as you said, a year from now, a year into it, still be sorting out the data. So That's awesome.
And we have big global multinational companies that we have definitely done that for. So that's not bad either. And sometimes you can parallel path it. I just think that whatever you do, ensure that you have a plan for getting traction quickly.
Right. Otherwise, it gets viewed as almost like a
Right.
science experiment and people lose
Right.
interest in it. Yeah, that totally makes sense. You know, if we go back a sec to that, you talked about sort of this really profound enthusiasm, if you will, and focus on first party data. You know, something you had mentioned to me, oh golly, probably about a year and a half ago, was this idea of, in order to get the data from the consumers, there has to be some sort of reciprocal value. And, you know, there's something you said that I thought was really fascinating at the time was when people hear the word value, they often think of money, right? Like, oh, here's a coupon or here's an offer. And it doesn't have to be money, right? It could be respect. It could be value in my time. Just talk a little bit about, you know, because I think you have a really interesting perspective on ways of thinking about value as it relates to engaging with consumers and that kind of exchange, if you will, of value for data.
Yeah, there's some really interesting stats out there about this. And conceptually, I think it just makes sense as well. You know, you want to protect your personal information, but I am also very happy to give it to you if you are creating value back for me. And there's this concept of living profiles. With the vast majority of people will tell you they are okay with a living profile if it's used correctly, respectfully, and to really drive the types of experiences that I want, you know, as an individual. So I think it's also important because we often talk about, you know, the value and personalization and loyalty and who's doing it well. I feel like we should also talk about how wrong it can go. If you don't do it well, it can go so wrong. And that's always been true, right? It's always been true that people are interested in ethics and corporate responsibility and they want added value, not just price, but it is more true today than it's ever been. And folks have the ability to align themselves with companies and make choices in a way that they didn't have before. And if you get it wrong, they can and will leave you. They'll often do it loudly and they'll take people with them.
You know, I quick little story about getting it wrong with me personally was this past weekend, my wife had a pretty major earache and I wanted to get a hot water bottle. You know, it's old school, you know, you always see, you know, put the hot water in and provide some heat to ease the pain. And I went into a large retail store, had the app on my phone and did a search of hot water bottle for pain. And I got, you know, cold ice packs. I got some sort of thing to keep food warm, like a food warmer. I got like a Gatorade, you know, drink bottle. And I'm thinking, I'm standing inside your store using your Wi-Fi on your app. Can't you just show me what's in the store?
Right.
Or tell me, right, in big flashing, we don't have anything in stock. You know, don't wander around the store and waste 15, 20 minutes of your time looking for something that's not here. And I left there, I'll be honest, pretty angry and pretty unlikely to go back because it just, I felt like they weren't valuing my time. And that was frustrating, right? Because you only have so much time on the weekend to get things done. Plus I was trying to get something to help my wife's pain. So it can quickly go wrong. Right, as you said.
That's a great, and I think too, that's why sometimes we don't see the progress that we want to see is because there's so many low-hanging fruit use cases like that. That would be so easy to fix, but there's 1,000 of those that would be, right, so easy to fix. So I think it's a matter of really putting yourself in your consumer's shoes and, you know, what matters to them, their time, their attention, in addition to, you know, the money. And that will help you prioritize. And one of my favorite examples of getting it right and getting it wrong is I just spent a conference at a Hyatt. I'm not a Hyatt loyalty member, but they knew who I was. And they, in a really polite way, texted me days before I went, we're looking forward to seeing you. You know, they texted me when I checked in, we see you've got a lovely room overlooking the water. let us know if you need anything. They don't know me. I'm not a member of their program, but they made an effort and they knew an appropriate amount about me. And I always say, contrast that, because I still remember the guy's name. It was Nick Colbert. That was the person, the guest experience lead that was texting. I remember his name, a month later. Contrast with that with Xfinity, who never misses an opportunity to ruin my day. Yep. And I've been a customer of theirs for 20 years. And I can call them and spend an hour going through the paces. And if I ever get a hold of someone, they don't know who I am. They don't know that that's the 5th time I've called. They don't know that they were supposed to come out yesterday and didn't. And they ask me stupid questions like, are your neighbors experiencing problems?
Right.
How would I know that? So I just think that, I like to say, be Nick, don't be Xfinity, right? If Nick can do it, right, Xfinity should be able to do it.
I love it. That's totally awesome. Just to kind of summarize what I heard is, consumers are not just a party to be sold to, right? But they want to be part of the value creation process, and that brands needs to embrace first-party data and not just staying at an arm's length and relying on retailers to do all the consumer facing for you. And then clearly define your business objectives, right? Measure your results based on the right data. So with that, thank you, Danica, for joining us. And thank you, David, for all the insights today. And thank you for joining us. In the past week, CGT came out with an article on setting the right data foundations for DTC. We will include a link in the description for you to check out the foundations that you need. And then looking back at our last CPG Bytes, we introduced a new tool for you, our loyal CPG Bytes viewers. We have an interactive DTC readiness assessment guide where you can see how you perform in comparison to others in the market. You'll also get the recommendations on how you can strengthen your DTC muscles at the end of the assessment. So once again, go to the descriptions below and click on the link. You may just learn something new about what you can do to improve your DTC capabilities. So finally, for more videos like these, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. And don't forget to turn on the bell for all notifications. And we'll be back in 2 weeks with more topics for CPG Bytes. Please take care.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Cheers.